Hello and welcome to the Property Talk podcast from RWinvest, bringing you tips and advice on all things property investment.
Okay, so hello and welcome to the Property Talk podcast. Myself, Harry Thomas here, alongside one of my colleagues, Samuel Norkett, both senior property investment consultancies here at RWinvest, here to talk you through the best way to invest £100,000 for maximum returns. Now, we're going to talk about how to invest £100,000, exploring some of the different strategies available, so not just property, but other assets as well for both saving and investing, and also offering some answers to commonly asked questions on the best way to invest this money. What would you say is one of the key factors that an investor needs to think about, Sam, when looking for an investment?
So I think there's always a few key headlines that come in on that, on that first conversation with an investor when they've got this pot of money. In this case, we're using an example then of £100,000, and they just don't know what to do with it in order to them to achieve the highest possible returns. For me, the first thing that I always ask, and I think is really, really key to think about, is what returns do you want? So you've got this £100,000, and before you're even going to think about how you're going to do it, what do you want to get out of it? So for me, what you really need to consider is as we said, the returns you want. So when you're investing into property, you're looking at your yields. So you're looking at your net rental yields along with capital growth. And then once you've decided the financial amount that you want to receive out of that, you can then work on to the next steps of how to actually achieve that goal. So for me, I think that's the one really that allows me to echo on the best possible way to achieve that ROI to my investors. That's always something which is at the top. How and what returns to achieve. Is that something that you get as well, Harry? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is definitely one of the key factors when it comes to investing. I also think that determining your risk is a good way to start, because before making any type of investment, whether you're investing £100,000, multi-million pounds, or even £10,000, you need to understand what level of risk you're prepared to accept. So it's always important to understand this level of risk, as this can help you identify the best asset to invest in. When it comes to investments, particularly around the £100,000, there are a few different investment types. Now, typically you're looking at either buy to let, you're looking at stocks, or your typical cash ISAs. Now, Sam, what do you think? Talk us through the buy to let market and sort of the key benefits of investing in this way.
When you compare it to other property strategies, when you're looking at buying a property for a quick flip, or buy to sell, it's called all sorts of things, or whether you own the property and you're just looking to generate the growth out of it, the buy to let process is quite often a little bit more simplified. In a nutshell, what it is you buy the property and you rent out to tenants to make a regular monthly profit. Then when it's time to resell, you can benefit from increased profit from the property sale, provided, of course, that the market has allowed the property to grow in value, which again is hopefully where we can come in narrowing down the best areas in the UK to invest, again, to benefit from the rental yields and the capital growth. That's the buy to let asset class, as it were. So that's one that we quite often end up at, but there are others, and there are some other factors in that you need to consider. Of course, when looking at buy-to-let, though, there is, as you were saying before, and Harry, that risk level that you need to look at, and you do need to make sure you're minimising that as much as possible. So in terms of the buy-to-let asset class, Harry, how is it you're able to, and I guess, how do you explain the levels of risk?
The good thing when it comes to buy-to-let is the risk level is relatively low, which makes for a perfect investment if you want to know how to invest that money safely. Now, the only real risks that come with buy-to-let are mainly focused on the property market itself. So if the property market was to crash in the area your buy-to-let property is based in, or if there's a low level of demand for rental properties, then your investment could potentially suffer. The good news is that by researching the market, you can actually identify the best places to invest that money in order to feel more secure in your venture. Companies like ourselves, we are very thorough when it comes to our due diligence to make sure we are, of course, recommending the best investments. And of course, when you are investing in an opportunity that it comes with assured rental yields, you're also guaranteed to make an income in this way.
So I think once you've worked out that a buy to let is going to be a good way to invest that 100k, and you've dissolved your risk as much as possible, as you said there, looking at your due diligence that you're carrying out, you need to make sure that you're firstly investing in the right location. So at the moment, we're seeing the Northwest in the UK, particularly Liverpool, and second to that Manchester, being the best place to invest to again take advantage of the capital growth and the net rental yields. So once you get that right, let's use an example. So as a hypothetical example, let's look at your potential return. So say you purchase a Liverpool investment property, which, as you know, Harry, a lot of people are doing at the moment for £75,000. Okay. So again, taking it down a little bit more, so you've got a bit more money to maybe use as a backup. And you charge your tenant, let's be really conservative, and let's say £500 a month for rent. Okay. This is going to leave you with an 8% rental yield. Okay, which over 20 years would have generated you a minimum of £120,000 in rental returns. Of course, more if the market was to increase in value, which we know is going to happen in Liverpool, but let's keep it as a flat figure. And then if you were to sell your property after 20 years and it had grown in value by around 200%, which is in accordance with past performance of Liverpool house price growth, it's likely to be high, but again, let's be conservative. You could then sell the property for 200%. So you can sell the property for £225,000, leaving you with a £150,000 profit. If you then combine both returns, you'd be left with an overall profit of £270,000 if, subject to saving up all the rental income, not spending any. So I think what you've come to here then is you've got the £100,000. You've looked at dissolving any elements of risk as possible, as you've covered there, Harry. And now you've understood your returns. So once you've seen that, and you need to say, okay, right, I'm looking at about £270,000 here over the course of many years. Am I happy with that? And the way to work out if you are is look at other investment types that are out there. Look at what else you could be going into and seeing if that's going to allow you to achieve a ROI.
It's safe to say the stock market is probably one of the most widely recognized investment methods out there. Of course, when investing in stocks, you tie your money up in a share of a company that you think is likely to increase in value. Of course, you have different ways you can do that. If you're a more of a hands-on approach, you like to do all of your own investing, of course, you can select those stocks yourself, but that does require a lot of knowledge. Alternatively, if you don't want that responsibility, you can hire someone to manage your investment for you. FTSE 100 actually went down by 24% in the first quarter of 2020. And that's probably why they're considered the riskiest of all asset classes, because the main risks when it comes to the stock market, they include economic changes and inflation. And the bad news for people that are very risk adverse is that the most successful investors are usually the ones who take the most risk. If you're someone who's very risk adverse, as I mentioned, this is not the right type of investment for you, because it will take you too long to accumulate your funds off of these small stocks and share trades. You're much better putting it into either a property market or another asset that we will potentially come to in a little bit. But Sam, talk us through sort of the highs and the lows in terms of the returns when it comes to a stock and shares.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious that, over the course of, really history, the property market has always excelled. Bricks and mortar as a tangible asset has always been something which has been more successful than the majority of asset class out there. But again, what I like to do is compare the returns, and you can really see if it's right for you or not. And for some people it is, and you do hear, as you said, some good stories out there. But unfortunately, more common than not, you do hear about the negative impacts, which is why the stocks market, as you said, is much more risky. If you're willing to take that risk, it could pay off. But for us, we like our investors to have as low risk as possible and the highest ROI. So really, unfortunately, the stock market isn't always the best asset class to go for. For me, I've heard too many stories of investors hearing one success story, trying to follow suit. And unfortunately, it doesn't work out for them. They then need the money. And of course, they've lost, as you said, if it was in the first quarter of this year, unfortunately, 25% of their funds. So if you do it right, it can be good. But unfortunately, for me, and it's why personally it's something I've never got into, the only way I could do it would be to pay someone to get it right. It's a little bit too risky for me. So it's not something I would guide my investors to do at the moment. The other thing to look at, though, of course, is cash ISAs. Harry, have you had many investors at all going down the ISA route instead? I know it's something where the returns aren't as high, but is it something you've had many investors do at the moment?
Not so much, no. I think that cash ISAs are for the people who don't want any risk whatsoever. They want 100% safety when it comes to their investment, and that's their best bet. Because, I mean, we all know, we've all looked at ISAs before. It's always something we've taken into consideration, but we all know the returns are pretty low. When it comes to investing, I think that on the most part, investors tend to want to take on a little bit of risk just to really maximize the investment returns. Of course, if you're putting in a cash ISA, you might get a 3-4% interest rate if you're lucky on an annual basis. And we've already kind of gone through the pros and cons of the property market and the stocks and shares. And of course, if you compare the potential returns, they're much lower. However, talking about from a risk point, if you're looking for something which is 100% secure, then of course this is the best way to go for, unless you go for a stocks and shares ISA, because of course a cash ISA is essentially a savings account. You're not at risk of losing your money, which of course is amazing, but it does have a detrimental impact on the amount of returns that you actually see. Now, there's also a little bit more restrictions when it comes to this type of investment, which of course make it quite harder to actually access your funds. For example, things like a lifetime ISA, you're only able to access that money in your account when you buy your first home or retire. So you can't actually use the funds if you ever need it for an emergency, as you would actually end up having to pay a penalty for that. So although the risk level is great that you don't have any, the restrictions for me kind of put me off a little bit. But I mean, look, what sort of returns can you get? Can you go into them in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, I think again, going back to investing this 100K, I think you've really hit the nail on the head there. It's really about finding out the potential returns you want and then getting that level of risk right. If you want high risk, again, you look at the stock market. For us, it's not something we'd guide you towards because we want to dissolve the risk as much as possible. If you want a lowest risk as possible, you look at something like an ISA. But unfortunately, your returns, as you said, is going to be very lucky if you get anything like 3%. Whereas you look at the buy-to-let market, we're looking at 8% just net rental yields alone. When you've got this pot of 100K, you need to think about what's right for you, what returns you want, and what level of risk you're happy to come at. Again, it's going back to the most successful asset class at the moment, and where you're hearing the most success stories is looking at buy-to-let market. That's when you can get those high ROIs, so return on investment. Harry, is there any other questions you get from investors, do you think, of how they can further dissolve any element of risk?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes back to what we were mentioning when it comes to the buy-to-let investment, and it comes back to doing due diligence. Doing due diligence not only on the companies that you're working with, but mainly in the location, because as cheesy as it may sound, location is the most important aspect, hence the term location. So companies like ourselves, we really are very stringent with our due diligence. We spend probably 6 to 9 months worth of due diligence into each developers, into each location, really analysing the markets, looking for some of the key fundamentals that we've spotted, which really make an area grow. And for example, working with the market leader like ourselves, our 16 years experience is here for your benefit. We cover all aspects from the legal to developer background, to the experience of the construction team, which digs deeper, including the architects, the project managers, the subcontractors. We even go as far as the furniture suppliers to really make sure that all aspects of your investment are covered. And of course, bringing this risk as low as physically possible. Now, there are some more sort of frequently asked questions. I think that once you've had a look through and we've kind of discussed all of the points that we have today, you can really see why most investors do opt for the property market. Now, Sam, what would you say a frequently asked question to yourself would be once they've discovered buy-to-let is the choice for them?
Yeah, once you've got buy-to-let, okay, and you've decided that's the right one for you, you've still got this 100K, you've looked at the returns and you're saying, do you know what? Yep, this is what I want to do. As I said, as you've said, Harry, there, you may have done a bit of further due diligence into the best developers out there, looking at their track record. You've got a few ideas, but you don't know what to do next. It's really important to get in touch. So you even speak to Harry or myself. We can then narrow down your search even further. Okay, so we can look at the returns you want realistically. We can then narrow it down into a development Okay, and then we can then find the absolute best unit or units in there, which are going to allow you to achieve the highest possible returns and allow you to get that £200,000 figure, for example, over the course of many, many years. So I think that's the sort of final steps that you have there. Once you've decided, yes, you do want to make an investment, yes, I want to buy to investment, get in touch with one of us, and then hopefully we can point you in the right direction.
I mean, when it comes to an investor, if they say, Sam, what advice can you offer me on how to start a property portfolio of 100K? Do I buy one property with a studio with that money? Do I buy a student unit with that money? Or I don't know, is there anything else that I can utilize? What would be your advice to that client?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you want to know how to start a property portfolio, which is the important thing, so it's not just one unit, the best advice would be to split your investments across multiple properties. Okay, so when it comes to investing, building a diverse portfolio is really key into getting that highest possible returns. And when you've got a budget of 100K, this can be easily achieved. This can be done by either using a buy-to-let mortgage on multiple investments, or investing in 2 starter properties, for example, with no more than £50,000 each, which is often looking at the student investment as an asset class. The former, can be a bit tricky, however, as most quality investments will cost more than this, and you pay for what you get, as it were. But certain investment companies will also allow you to pay for your investments in separate installments. This way you can put down a payment of around, let's say, 35% of the property price onto multiple investments, and you can pay the rest at a later date. And this is really key at the moment because, of course, the way you can, going back to the initial my initial part of my answer there, is diversifying your portfolio by buying multiple properties. People can really do this at the moment because there's some exceptional offers to be had as a result of the current market. So whereas you may usually need to put down 50% of the property price, which will only allow you to buy one unit perhaps, you can now put down, as I mentioned, perhaps 35% of the property price and allow you to buy multiple units, which ultimately is, again, spreading that risk, allowing for a higher ROI. That's something that is really key to get going.
As a region, I think everybody knows that where most investors are making their money is the northwest of the country. I think that if you look at over the last 10 years or so, the growth rates there have been absolutely fantastic. And if we look at the key fundamentals, which has made the most recent northern powerhouse, naming that as Manchester, really transforming to the cosmopolitan city it is today, that for us is fantastic. And that actually kick-started by a lot of investment coming from the government into the area. Now, what we're seeing at the moment and what's really exciting us is this same transition is now happening in Liverpool. So Liverpool is only really at the beginning of the regeneration that it's currently seeing, but in terms of the rental yields, it's amazing. It actually shows some of the highest rental yields in the entire country, in some areas even reaching up to as high as 10%. This is thanks at the moment, the properties in Liverpool city centre are very well priced, they're affordable, and rental demand is high. If you're anything like us, you constantly study the markets. We actually looked at a recent Savills report highlighting the Northwest region as having the highest predicted growth rate over the next 5 years. So that gives you even more confidence that buy-to-let investments can grow significantly in value over time. Of course, in investing in buy-to-let areas like Liverpool, where prices are low, however, there's high projections for the coming years. Of course, it makes that £100,000 budget look a lot more attractive. And of course, you can utilize that, as I mentioned, with leveraging with the banks and of course, building up a nice successful portfolio as the area grows over the next 3, 5, 10 years. Of course, your portfolio is only going to grow with it.
Well, thank you very much for listening to the Property Talk podcast. There's a lot we've covered there, but of course there's a lot we haven't covered there. So if you do need any other questions, or if you want some more guidance into the best way to invest your 100K into property, please do get in touch with myself, Samuel Norquette.
And myself, Harry Thomas. We're always here ready to answer any questions that you have regarding the property market. If there's anything else that we haven't covered in today, just let us know. We're more than happy to help, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.